Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee for today, which is March 5th. I've been joined by Council members Fletcher, Allison, and Cunningham, which is a quorum of our committee. The first item of business today will be to delete item 5 from the agenda. This was a quasi-judicial hearing for lack of payment due to the state of Minnesota, but that payment has been made. So I'm going to move to delete item 5 from the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. I'll then move the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of our liquor license approvals and our liquor license renewals, as well as item number 8, which is authorizing the city to join in an application in order to vacate the underground, well, not vacate, I shouldn't use that word actually, in order to make some changes to the city's rights and ownership of underground mined space at 1101 West River Parkway, as well as item number 9, which is setting a public hearing for March 19th, which has to do with amending our rental license expiration dates and fees. Are there any items on the consent agenda anyone would like to pull for discussion? Seeing none, I'll move the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. Then we'll move on to our public hearing agenda, starting with item number 1. Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to introduce Lead Inspector Mohammed Ishmael, who's going to present on that item.
Mr. Ishmael, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Mohammed Ismail. I'm the lead licensing inspector assigned to 5th Precinct. I'm presenting today an application from, if I mispronounced, I ask forgiveness for the licensee, the Prodigal LLC. And I didn't know the history of that word, the meaning of the word until Chef explains to me. Now I know what behind it for that name. So, doing business as the Prodigal Pub, located at 25 East 26th Street in Ward 10. The space was formerly occupied by Geese Fermentation Bar. The applicant is requesting an on-sale liquor with Sunday sales, limited entertainment. The business have indoor seatings for 46, and there is no outdoor patio. The proposed hours are Tuesday through Thursday, 4 p.m. until 11 p.m., Friday 4 p.m. till midnight, Saturday 11 a.m. until midnight, and Sunday until 10 p.m. On February 18th, notices were sent to residents and property owners within 600 feet of the premises. All multi-unit buildings were posted. Notices were also sent to the Whittier Alliance and Councilmember Bender. We have received 2 responses, one from Whittier Alliance Neighborhood Association in support for the business, and other response is concerned with parking. There are no complaints, 311 calls, police report that related to the new license, and they do not have any operating conditions on their application. Licenses and Consumer Services Division recommends approval of an on-sale liquor with Sunday sales, limited entertainments for Prodigal Pub. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff on item number 1? I'll note that this is our new way of doing public hearings for license applications where the actual lead inspector will be giving the report. So it might look different to members of the committee or members of the public. I think this is a good way to help with leadership development and make sure that the people who are doing the work actually also get the opportunity to give the report. So thank you for being here today. Seeing no questions, we'll open the public hearing on item number 1, which is an on-sale liquor with Sunday sales for the Prodigal Pub. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Please step forward. State your name, whether you want to or not. Step forward and tell us what you're doing. And please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name's Jeff Calmetto, and my wife and I she's actually going to be the owner, but she's a professor at Normandale Community College, and Tuesday and Thursdays, and has class today, so she sends her apologies. I've been the pastor in Whittier for the last 32 years, hence the name Prodigal Pub. And first of all, let me say this guy's been very kind and very helpful in this process, so thank you, Ishmael. Mohammed. And the dream is simply to continue in a new way, building community and friendship in Whittier through this time, through drink, food, and good conversation. My heritage is Wales, Welsh, and English. So in the great tradition of the public house, we hope to create a neighborhood pub, and appreciate your blessing.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Fletcher.
I'll move approval on this item.
Approval of item number 1 has been moved. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll move on to item number 2. Ms. Roberts, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to introduce Lisa Schmeller, who will be presenting.
Ms. Schmeller, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Lisa Schmeller, and I'm a licensing inspector for the city of Minneapolis. I'm presenting an application for Venn Brewing Company, LLC, doing business as Venn Brewing Company, located at 3550 East 46th Street, Suite 140 in Ward 12. The current license is an off-sale malt liquor growler, on-sale taproom with Sunday sales with limited entertainment. Applicant is requesting a permanent expansion of premises to expand its current licensed outdoor patio located on private property. Venn Brewing Company has been operating at this location since October 2017. There are no changes in the hours of operation. It's Monday 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., Tuesday through Thursday 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., Saturday 12 to midnight, and Sunday 12 to 9 p.m. It currently has an outdoor seating for 50, and this expansion will add an additional 48 seats on the southwest corner of the private patio. On February 11th, 2019, public hearing notices were sent to residents and property owners within 600 feet of the premises. Notices were sent to the Standish Erickson Neighborhood Association, West of Rail Business Association, and Councilmember Andrew Johnson. We have received 6 responses from the public hearing notices, 3 in support and 3 with concerns about parking, noise, rude behavior, vehicle and pedestrian traffic. A review of 311 calls and police calls found no significant issues concerning the business. At this time, I recommend approval of a permanent expansion of premises for Venn Brewing Company.
Are there any questions for Ms. Schmeller on item number 2? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. We'll open the public hearing on item number 2, which is an expansion of premise for Venn Brewing. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Madam Chair and Council. My name is Connie Sisko. This is my husband, Kyle Sisko.
Hi.
We are the owners of Venn Brewing Company. We've been before you a few times before, and we're happy to be back. As Lisa has stated all the facts, we are hoping to expand our patio. In the last year since the opening, we've had a really great reception from the local community just within a few miles of us, and really are building a neighborhood place for people to gather. We have noticed with our existing patio, there just aren't enough seats out there. We've got a lot of folks who, are looking out the windows or out the patio doors hoping to get a spot and have to wait their turn just because it's a little bit too crowded for them. So we respectfully request the expansion today.
Thank you for being here and congratulations to your
Thank you.
success. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Allison.
I will move approval.
Approval of item number 2 has been moved. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll move on then to item number 3. Mr. Ishmael.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. The applicant is Miles Inc., doing business as Tercel, located at 2221 West 50th Street in Ward 13. Tercel currently has on-sale liquor with strong beer, no live entertainment. They have been operating this location since 2013. They are requesting license upgrade for on-sale liquor with Sunday sales, no live entertainment. They have indoor seatings for 49 and outdoor 20 on a private patio, and there is no change in their current hours of operations. On February 18th, notices were sent to the residents and property owners within 600 feet of the premises. Notices were also sent to Fulton and Lyndhurst Neighborhood Associations, Southwest Minneapolis Business Association, and Councilmember Palmasano. We have received 5 responses, all which support the license upgrade. There's no 311 calls or police calls that has any issue with their upgrade, and there's no any operating conditions in their license. License and Consumer Service Division recommends approval on an on-sale liquor with Sunday sales, no live entertainment for Tercel. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Is there any questions for staff on this report? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on item number 3, which is on-sale liquor with Sunday sales for Tercel at 2221 West 50th Street. And I'll thank Councilmember Palmisano for being here today. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Charlie Broder.
Molly Broder, Mom.
And we're the owners and operators of Broder's Restaurants. That includes Tercel at 2221 West 50th Street. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the City Council and everybody involved from the city and the assistance and support that was shown in the passage of the ballot initiative in November. Molly Broder, along with some other business owners, worked tirelessly, as well as myself, to help support that. So thank you. And I'd also like to thank Minneapolis Licensing for being just an absolute asset to small business in this city. And we have great fortune to operate in this city. We look forward to looking to add an Amaro program to our existing restaurant at Tercel. We love focusing on Italian-inspired cuisine at a very high level, as well as Italian wine. But in Italy, Amaro is a wonderful addition to a meal, and we look forward to doing that along with some specialty cocktails. So we hope everybody can come check it out. But thank you.
Great. Thank you for your testimony. And Molly, thank you for all the work you've done over the years to help get restaurants with liquor licenses, first wine and beer, and now liquor, out into the community. It's been a real pleasure to be able to see your leadership in our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Cunningham.
I will move approval of this item.
Item number 3 has been moved for approval. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll then move on to our last public hearing item, which is item number 4. Mr. Fussy, oh, I see. Oh, yeah, great. I wasn't sure who was presenting this.
Say that it was. Oh, that's the U.S.
Yeah.
Got it. Alrighty. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman and
Good
committee
afternoon.
members. I'm Nick Magrino from Regulatory Services. I'm here today to talk about an amendment to Chapter 244, adding some language to the definitions there having to do with rental license revocations and who holds interest in licenses, and once a license has been revoked, just clarifying some of the language around future interest that they may have in a license. There's sort of 3 categories here that we're trying to get at: future interest and reversionary interest. So that would be, for example, like a contract for deed if you were to sell a property. The second one would be mostly having to do with lending. So if you were to lend money to somebody who is then going to try to operate a rental dwelling, if you're the lender of money, you would still have a financial interest in that, as well as operational control. So if you were to be a property management company and you had a rental license revoked, we would also find that as being related to interest. And this is just clarification. We don't feel that this changes the meaning of the ordinance at all. We just thought it would be good to include a little bit more detail about what it is that we were getting at. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Magrino on this item? I'm the author. I don't have any questions. Everyone else seems to understand it. It's fairly basic.
Yep.
I'll open the public hearing then on item number 4, which is essentially clarifying the interest in rental licenses or provisional licenses in the city of Minneapolis. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I'll move approval. comments or questions? Councilmember Allison?
Oh, I was just going to say that I appreciate your work in putting this together, Councilmember, and I think it's really important that as we're, as a city and as a body moving forward in making sure that everything's on the up and up with properties in the city, I think this is a step in the right direction. So, thank you.
Thank you. Further comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Thank you, Mr. Magrino. We'll then move on to our 2 discussion items, starting with item number 10, which Councilmember Allison and I put on a discussion item just so that Mr. Carroll could give this presentation.
Well, I appreciate that.
We appreciate your work so much that it's not fair to have you come and talk about what we want to do. It's also fair to have you come and tell us how successful you were in securing money for a variety of projects in the city.
Well, we were successful. I'll accept that on behalf of my CPED colleagues. It takes the village to raise $12 million, which we did this year in grant funding. And lots of people are involved in that, lots of individual city project coordinators, CPED management, development finance staff, city attorneys, Irene Casper, and many others. But we did have a successful year. I am Kevin Carroll from the Business Development Division.
Mr. Carroll, before you continue, perhaps we can pull the zip drive out of the computer so that anyone watching is not looking at, yeah, great. Okay. Thanks.
All right. So on the agenda today, we have 17 new grant awards from the fall 2018 round. The applications were submitted on November 1. The total amount of grant funding provided was $6.4 million. The grants ranged from a low of $60,500 to a high of a little over $1 million that went to one project. 13 of the 14 projects that we submitted grant applications for got some or all of the funding they were seeking. In terms of the amount of funding that we sought and the amount that we were actually awarded overall, we got about 72% of the money that we were seeking. And when you look at the individual grantors, if you're interested in that, we ended up getting 47% of all the money that DEED awarded, 49% of all the money that the Met Council awarded, and 79% of all the Hennepin County funding awarded. This is a routine matter. I'm here twice a year to talk about this. It's routine, but it's still fun, I think. And it's not routine in the sense that this was a year in which we set the new record for the total amount of grant funding awarded to Minneapolis projects in a single year. The total was a little over $12.5 million. The old record was $8.8 million, so we beat it by about 42%. And the reason we did that is, there are 2 grant rounds per year. For 6 of the last 7 years, we've been averaging between 8.4 and 8.8 million a year. So we've had like 2 $4 million rounds, or a $5 million and a $3 million. This year we had 2 rounds that were over $6 million. So we had 2 good rounds. So all the planets sort of aligned, and we're very happy about that. And I'm personally happy because I started doing this work in early 2007, and I thought at the time it'd be nice to stay here long enough to get to the point where I was involved in getting $100 million worth of grant funding, and we crossed that threshold with this round, so we're now at about $101 million. So I'm feeling happy about that.
Doesn't
for
mean
myself.
You can retire, just...
Well, despite my youthful appearance, I'll be 65 in April, so we may be getting closer. But my new goal, I've been involved in 412 successful grant applications for the city. So my new goal is to get to 500. So I might be around a few more years if you'll have me.
That'd be great.
Okay.
So, Mr. Carroll, I have just a question for you. We sat here last year kind of debating with you and everyone else, changing our strategy to only allow grant applications for various funds if they had affordable housing in them, or they were living wage plus job creation. And there was a concern that we weren't going to get enough applications. Then there was a concern that we wouldn't be awarded enough money. Yet it looks like we've met a record. How do you explain that?
Well, the number of applications we get and the amount that we seek goes up and down kind of based on economic conditions. I think the fact that we got $12 million this year was primarily attributable to just a lot of demand and a lot of good projects, and we work with the applicants to sort of tailor and fine-tune the applications to make them as competitive as possible. I've heard anecdotal evidence that occasionally a project that would have otherwise sought grant funding for an entirely market rate project chose not to pursue it. I'm not aware of any of those projects not proceeding or failing because of that. We're continuing to sort of gather anecdotal evidence. As you know, in the last round, there were 4 projects that sought waivers from the affordability requirements. We granted 2 waivers, denied 2. My understanding is that the 2 that were denied waivers are still moving forward. I mean, people often find a way to make these things work. They have to kind of look at the budget again. Brownfield funding is important to lots of projects. It's critical to some. But I think it was a good decision. And in this round, we had a number of projects that did create affordable units. Calhoun Towers, their current phase, has 25 affordable units. Checkerboard is going to have at least 100 units. They've talked about increasing the number of units in that project recently, and you're going to see that when I come back in a month or 2 for the spring round. They were originally going to build 200 units. Now they're talking about 500. So the number of affordable units is going to go up proportionately. Gateway Northeast has 75 units. Portland and Washington has 90 units. So affordable housing is being built, and it's being built with the assistance of Brownfield grant funding in many cases.
It's great. So, I mean, the long and short of it is we're slowly encouraging people to put affordable housing in. If they want to apply for these grants, they're going to have to. But it's not really stopping us from getting projects funded that we think are a priority. And we have granted some waivers. So
Right.
It's not like we're saying absolutely not. But so far, so good.
Yeah.
1 round. We'll see what happens next, but I think the early results are pretty positive.
Yeah, and I can tell you right now, there'll be 3 waiver requests for the spring 2019 round, and there'll be a staff report, there'll be staff recommendations on that, so you'll see that again soon.
Great. Are there other questions for Mr. Carroll? Seeing none, thank you so much for your report. I'll move approval of the staff recommendation in item 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which is essentially accepting grants from various other entities for the projects that we have listed in the paperwork we have. All in favor of the chair's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Mr. Carroll, thank you very much.
Thank
Very
you.
successful year. And then we'll move on to our remaining discussion item, which is item number 11. Ms. Keller, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, council members. I'm Kim Keller, Interim Director of Regulatory Services, and I'm very excited to be here today to talk with you about the Renter First policy. I'm joined in doing so by a number of partners that I'd like to recognize as well. Homeline is here, representatives from Urban Homeworks, MPHA, the Family Housing Fund, the POLAD Foundation, Inquilinos Unidos, Legal Aid, MHA, Volunteer Lawyers Network, and Faegre Baker Daniels have all taken time to be here today. There may be another who I have missed in here, and apologies if I've done so. We're also joined by city departments as well. CPAD has taken time, MPD has taken time, and though he's captive audience, I believe that Joel Fussy would be here anyway. And we also have regulatory services employees who have come here today. So I have a very brief presentation on the policy for you, and I'm asking the committee to recommend adoption by the full council. The Renter First policy is intended to clearly articulate the department and the city's approach to rental housing, committing to safety, stability, health, and dignity of people who rent their homes. It also directs the department's attention to property owners who are non-compliant or who maintain their properties in disrepair. The policy works on both a systems level with programs, procedures, and resource allocation, as well as on a human level, recognizing the importance of these individual interactions. And finally, the policy reinforces the direction that we're already going and takes us to the next level as we take actions that hold non-compliant owners accountable and minimizing the impact on renters. Minneapolis has a history of racial covenants and redlining, the effects of which are deep and far-reaching. Borrowing from an analysis of census data that was done by CPAD last year, I see that 57% of white households in Minneapolis are homeowner-occupied, while only 21% of black households are homeowners. These racially restrictive policies and others denied and divested people of color from wealth creation, opportunities for wealth creation, leaving these groups more vulnerable to market conditions like rising rents and low vacancy rates. And responding to these realities has been an important part of adopted city policy, including our 2040 Comprehensive Plan and the Unified Housing Policy. This is a directional shift that is also being seen in cities across the country as they too adopt policy that protects and prioritizes renters. The policy is rooted in the work of regulatory services, but renters interact with and receive support from many other city departments, and they too have contributed to this policy. The impactful feedback from CPAD, City Attorney's Office, City Coordinator's Office, Health Department, NCR, Police, Public Works, Finance, and Civil Rights, as well as external stakeholder groups and policymakers, provided direction, context, and identified gaps within the drafts. And all of this leadership has been and will continue to be instrumental as we implement. At its core, I talk about the Renter First policy as establishing a system of early intervention and safety nets. Through the policy, we look to do a few main things. We want to recognize both rental housing and renters as community assets, and we want to treat them as such. We want to ensure that strong enforcement protocols for non-compliant owners are present and that we have an environment that is attractive to responsible ownership. And we want to strategically develop partnerships, both inside and outside of the city, in order to better understand how our policies impact people and how collectively we can be more effective. Implementation of the policy is multifaceted and will change over time. The activities themselves will adapt over time. I've pulled forward a few implementation strategies that I just wanted to expand upon. So as we strategically deploy department resources, we have a number of initial actions, including programmatic work, such as our use of tenant remedies actions and conditions on rental properties, both of which we use to hold non-compliant property owners accountable. That also includes strategically focusing our inspections, concentrating on properties that are in disrepair, have a high volume of renter complaints, and those that have a history of repeated citations. And deployment of resources also takes into account how the city evaluates environmental hazards, such as infestations, lead, radon, and mold. Implementation strategies also include supporting high-quality rental property owners through better information sharing and financial opportunities to preserve affordable housing. And it provides guidance toward our engagement efforts. Again, ensuring that the renter is centered in the activity in improving both renter and owner access to culturally relevant communications materials and information about the property. Finally, I think it's important to note that the policy outlines the need for staff to be prepared to carry forth this work and to be supported as they do so with resources and tools. I'd like to end the presentation with a few examples of current work that I feel like is Renter First. So Hearing Tenant Voices is a 3-year initiative of the Creative City Making program begun by the City Coordinator's Office that partnered artists and inspectors to look at the intersection of equity, code compliance, and an individual approach that an inspector may take. And looking at all of these things to better understand how the components impact the renter experience during the inspection process. It included a workshop that brought together renters, inspectors, and administrative staff to deepen the understanding of their experience by looking at power dynamics, implicit bias, stress reactions, lenses that we all take into account as we make decisions and assess situations. And I did it all through artistic practices. This was a deep work, and we are exploring ways to continue it. Secondly, our tenant navigator role is currently held by 3 employees assigned to work specifically with renters. They work to make sure that renters are part of the inspection process by making sure they have information about what is happening and why it's happening. They explain city processes, especially these very intricate, complicated ones and complicated situations. And we continue to assess additional possibilities for this role. We also have a focus on culturally appropriate outreach. In coordination with communications, we're creating videos like our recent What to Expect During an Inspection, which was written from a renter perspective and produced in multiple languages. And we're reaching out to renters and explaining what's happening with their housing, whether it's through direct mailings or in coordination with advocacy groups or through our tenant navigators. The last example I want to provide is a study that's being conducted in partnership with the Family Housing Fund, which will include an assessment of current licensing framework. The Renter First policy will be used as a values lens through which we'll look at this work and to inform the assessment and any design principles that come out of it. So, with those examples, I've concluded my presentation. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Are there questions for Ms. Keller or comments anyone would like to make about the policy? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Keller. This is really well timed because we just had in Ward 3 a really pretty intense set of events and a really important community meeting where I got to see this sort of in action in a way that was really powerful. So I just wanted to share how much we're seeing the connection between community safety and quality housing, and how much, if the quality of housing deteriorates or the management of a building deteriorates, that leaves us vulnerable to public safety issues and other kinds of things. And so the entire neighborhood saw the need. As we were talking about solutions, when you talk about public safety, I was expecting people to really lean on MPD for solutions or lean on, and more as we heard what people were experiencing, they were looking at, oh my gosh, what can we do in these buildings? What can we do to make tenants feel like they can report problems and get responses? What can we do to resolve some of these issues? And I want to really commend your staff. Robert Sayers, who's here, did a really terrific job in that meeting, but I think it made everybody feel like having MPD and reg services and everybody working together and really listening to people went such a long way towards making people feel like we can come together and build community and work together. And so I think this tenant focus is very, very important and is really having a positive impact in our community. So thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for this presentation. This is so necessary for my community in Ward 4, as we've seen a rapid amount of homes being converted into single-family home rentals. About a 3-year period, we saw about 700 homes being converted. So that means that we're seeing a very rapid amount of folks becoming renters, seeing more renters in the ward, and also in not good conditions. And so it is urgent for us to have these protections in place and for us to begin having the conversation centered from the renter's perspective. I'm a renter myself, but centered from the renter's perspective, given that we really need to make sure that renters have a voice in the decision-making process and are taken into consideration. So I'm really grateful for this, and then the thoroughness of what it looks like implemented and what the framework is. My question that I have is, talk about culturally appropriate outreach, and I was just wondering more specifically, what does that look like?
Through the chair, Councilmember Cunningham, the communications and the outreach that we're doing is guided by a member of our team, Rose Lindsay, who has a background in both communications and engagement. She comes to us from CPED. We're also working collectively with communications and with NCR. So the outreach can involve making sure that the notices that are put up or the information that we're sending out is translated in a way that makes sense, that the translation actually makes sense. It's not just a word for word. It also means going and attending meetings and being present with people, working with key partners like Inquilinos Unidos, who are doing the big job of organizing and of making sure that that renters' perspective is brought forward and working with them. It's an internal strategy and an external strategy as well.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. In my ward, 52% of Hmong folks are renters. A huge portion of Black folks are renters, and I know, particularly in the Black community, a lot of folks won't even try to reach out for any sort of help if there's something wrong in where they live as a renter because it feels too vulnerable. And so when I think about a culturally appropriate, I think about that. There is a culture of fear of retaliation, of the loss of housing, the loss of security. So that is a barrier to being able to access someone's rights. And so, and then, thinking about Hmong folks and like what specifically are barriers for them to be able to connect with the resources to help make sure that they're protected and that they live healthy, safe, and dignified spaces. So just wanted to name that and what I've been seeing and what I've been hearing and making sure we're incorporating that and thinking about that as well when we talk about culture. So thank you.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, and I appreciate this coming forward, and I thank Councilmember Allison and Bender for leading on this and setting this kind of policy framework to kind of tee us up for some work coming in the future. I also really appreciate that you were recognizing that while regulatory services is standing up there, there's policies that will ripple through many different departments and practices and protocols, including health and CPAD and finance and property services and public works and civil rights and neighborhood and community relations. So I think it's important that we foreshadow that really what we're trying to do is set the stage here for from changes in practice and in policies. I want to just highlight that the Housing Policy and Development Committee is ready to engage in these. We have part of our work plan and agenda is already looking at what we can help do to develop better policies. There's also, we now have our new Housing Advisory Committee that I'm sure is anxious and eager to get involved and engaged in this, had the first meeting, and it's a fantastic group of people. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of policy recommendations that might come forward from this work and this effort and where we can go with those. It certainly is something I think that is a concern of many. And I represent the 2nd Ward, which includes all the area around, includes all the campuses of the University of Minnesota and almost all the area directly across the street from the campus, but not quite. And there's certainly a very unique rental population there. I mean, not unique in the world, but so many students are renting there, and they have some of the same fears and concerns about what are they supposed to do if they're having an issue with a landlord. It's also unique, I think, and it's probably similar to many parts of the city where a lot of the best landlords are small landlords who are doing the best they can and are providing pretty good, valuable housing, but they also have second thoughts and worries about dealing with the city too. And so we end up seeing, tenants and landlords both are afraid, or there's sort of a culture, a history of being afraid to enter into any kind of work with the city because there might be some consequences that they didn't want. So I think this, I just want to acknowledge there were a few key bullet points in here about reaching out and supporting those landlords and helping them do a better job. I think a lot of times we've gotten ourselves in trouble where we weren't helping keep the housing safe enough, and it got to the point where nobody could live there anymore, and that's not the long-term goal that we want. And in order to get safe and better housing, working with the landlords and the renters is going to be key to doing that. So I appreciate this, and I just want to say I'm all in for helping, and I look forward to where we go with next steps.
Councilmember Allison.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. My interest in this policy goes kind of a long way. When I look at the Hearing Tenant Voices project, it's pretty cool because I know that Monkway Ndosi is the artist who engaged in that project and sort of got things rolling in the department. That year of creative city making when Monkway started was actually the same year that I started as an artist in creative city making, different department, but trying to do similar things. I don't think I was as successful as Monkway. Obviously, regulatory services has really and leaned into that collaboration. And so this policy I really see as an affirmation of the work that regulatory services has sort of been doing on its own in a lot of ways, and a way to, again, as some of my colleagues have said, really pivot towards the city's priorities. We got the chance, just for the sake of my colleagues and the public, Councilmember Bender and I got the chance to go talk to some of the folks at regulatory services, as you would expect. It's a room full of subject matter experts and highly professional folks that we work with. One woman stood up and said, hey, we're all for heading in this direction. We're already sort of headed in this direction. But being a hammer, sort of, it brought in money. It did, kind of listed off the certain things of like being a hammer, although it did not it didn't make tenants, it instilled a lot of fear with tenants, not sure, if they were going to be helped by regulatory services or displaced by regulatory services. And that the work of doing that kind of culture shift and meeting the city's goals is a lot harder. It's not necessarily sort of action to money. It's not as check the box as the direction that we're going. And so I really want to commend regulatory services, the department, for leaning into this work and being willing to not do what's easy, but but as a department, do what's right by tenants as well. And I think that in some cases, that fear of dealing with the city that a lot of folks, I represent Ward 5, a lot of folks, know about Mahmoud Khan and that whole situation. Their fears about what it means for regulatory services to come in can sometimes get affirmed when the landlord, we punish a landlord, rightfully so, as we should, but then the person who ends up being on the hardest end of that punishment for the landlord ends up being the tenant. And so I think that this is also a way for us to not only lean into the work that a lot of folks in regulatory services are already leaning into, but really solidify it as the city's position to reorient ourselves towards protecting renters. So, and this comes in a long line of, again, renter protections that are being led by Councilmember Cunningham, Councilmember Goodman, and so I'm happy to have you all support. And I also just want to say that the outside push from advocates from groups like Inclinados Unidos is and not just them, but is a really big reason why we're, I think, having a lot of these discussions. So I'm happy to continue the work and add this to the long list of work that we're doing here at the city to protect renters. So thank you, and thank you, team.
I just wanted to see if Council President Bender had something she wanted to add.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for letting me speak. I'm not on the committee, but wanted to be here today. I actually think that this kind of change, where we're looking deep into our values and our systems as a city, is some of the most transformative work that we get to be a part of as staff and policymakers. And though this is a simple 3-page document, I think it has the potential to really truly transform how we're affecting thousands of people's lives in the city of Minneapolis. And I'm really grateful for all the people who helped us come up with this idea of voicing a shift in our shared values. When I first took office 5 years ago, when we talked about renters, there was often an either explicit or implicit value about people who rent their homes, that they aren't invested in community, or that there was somehow something wrong with talking about the unique ways that our increasingly challenging housing market affects renters. But I think we are at the point where we're ready to say, as a city, whether you rent or you own your home, you're a very valuable part of our community. And we know, again, that people who are renting are more susceptible to displacement and to the pressure of our housing market. And so this is a way for us to voice how, particularly our Regulatory Services Department, which touches rental properties so explicitly, so many times, really can help support our overall shared goals of making sure that renters are in safe and stable housing. And that is an asset, that having well-maintained rental housing in a city that has more than half of our constituents renting is a community asset that we have a public responsibility to ensure is well maintained. And so when we went and spoke with the 90 or so staff at Reg Services the other day, we talked about this policy as an invitation to staff who are out there every day on the streets of our city to help us do better, and to really think about every single interaction they have, if they want to, as a way to help inform us moving forward. Are we targeting our resources appropriately? Do we have the right resources in this department? How is all of that you're learning in your day-to-day work, how can we do better? And when we talked about that, Councilmember Allison and I, with staff, they immediately had a lot of ideas, because they've been doing this for years. So they know how to answer that question pretty easily. I think it is also a time for us to look at this department's budget really critically and understand that we will have to solve a structural problem in the Regulatory Services Department's budget. It probably means, us making an investment here because, as Councilmember Allison alluded to, this department has been relying on fees and violations that we're no longer collecting. So I think if we want this department to do all the things we're asking it to, we need to invest. And I think that will be gradual over time, but that's part of this deal, is to make sure that when we're asking our departments to do more and do things differently, that we're investing both in the employees who've been here for a really long time, who know, who have that knowledge and that expertise that Councilmember Allison talked about, but also like understanding where we think this department is going in 5 years and how we need to resource it well. And I also think of this as a description for our new leadership. We've been really grateful, Interim Director Keller, for your leadership. You've embraced this moment. Sometimes interim directors might come in and just try to keep the lights on, but you are really showing extraordinary leadership and helping us connect with employees and help figure out where the department is going. But I think this is a good description for what we are looking for in our next regulatory services director, someone who's truly committed to centering renters in their work and leading this department through change. And that would be, I would think, the highest priority skill set in a director is someone who we think has demonstrated experience in leading through change. And so I'm excited about where this department is going. And again, just really grateful for the leadership of the interim director and Kelly Jones, who sat with us for many hours, just helping us understand the department and where it's going, and all the staff that helped contribute to this. And again, to our advocates, it's really meaningful to have you here today for this. Homeline and Incalinos, Legal Aid, Family Housing Fund, POLAD, the leadership that you are showing in the community, we're hearing you. And I mean, this is really the result of conversations that we've had over many years where folks who work directly with renters are telling us, look, we can pass ordinances, we can do all these things, but you need to get your city functions right first. So we heard you, and this is our one step toward making sure every time we're in a building, every time we're looking at our policies, every time we're looking at our budgets, that we are doing so with that overarching value of making sure that renters in our city are in safe, dignified, stable, and healthy housing. Thanks.
Thank you. So I will call on Councilmember Allison to move approval, and then I just have a couple comments.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. I will move approval of this item number 11.
So I want to thank you, Kim, for being here today and for giving this presentation, and to all of the people who have been doing the real work on the ground to help tenants. That's really what it's all about in the end, is any one person that we can help have a better experience with where they live and their housing is a good day's work. And so to have a large number of advocates who have worked with a large number of people to help make their housing better is a blessing to the city. I think Council President Bender summed it up. Just this year and just this council, we have worked through our Section 8 ordinance, we've passed advance notice, we've passed tenant protections. But the most important thing we can do is figure out how we, as an enterprise, work with advocates and renters to ensure that they have safe and stable housing. We should point the fingers at ourselves and try to figure out what has not worked right in the past and how we can make that work better. Ultimately, I think everybody on the panel and everyone on the council really believes in the work that we're doing and believes in affordable housing. But the truth of the matter is the housing stock that we have in the city of Minneapolis is a public asset and resource. It might be owned by the private sector, and I thank the private sector for coming to the table, but ultimately, in this day and age where we are in 2019, housing is a public resource. The alternative to not having that public resource is sleeping outside. And so while it might be owned differently than government owning things, it is the utmost in things that people need in order to be stable in their lives. And we need to view housing as the public resource that it is. I really like the way that this has been framed. All residents who rent their homes will live in safe and dignified, stable, and healthy housing, because I feel like renter has become a bad word. And I feel like some people feel like they have something to be ashamed of because they rent their home instead of own it. And I think we as leaders need to help change that dynamic. It doesn't matter how you come to live where you do. You live where you do and you live in our city. And as leaders of the city, I think it's really important for us to value that housing and people generally and ensure that all of the housing in the city, whether you rent it or own it, is safe, dignified, stable, and healthy for the people who live in our city. So I'm impressed with this work because it's a policy that says little and means a lot. It's not an ordinance change where we can say, hey, we did that, now other people are going to go out and do something. We're going to say we did this because the hundreds of us that work in the enterprise together need to get onto the same path for the benefit of the people that we represent. So I'm really excited about this work because I think it's truly meaningful when we point the finger at ourselves and determine what we can do in order to move the entire community forward. I think this work does that. And I want to thank the people that have led in this effort. On Councilmember Allison's motion to approve, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.